you'll have more clients, you'll have all the things that you're looking for, and then you have more freedom.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Fail Fast podcast. Today we have a special guest from North Carolina. She's a freedom speaker or a freedom coach, an author, a mother, and with us today we have Rachel Gilmore. How are you, Rachel?
I'm wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here today.
Awesome. Rachel, with coach, mother, speaker, all of this, how do you have time?
Yeah, that's a really good question. People ask me that all the time. I think it's about being very intentional about where you spend your time. That's the biggest thing, because we all have time for the things that we love and that we enjoy, right?
That's true, yes.
We make time. Yeah, so I think time is something that a lot of people use as an excuse.
So Rachel, why don't you tell us what's a freedom coach?
So for me, a freedom coach is, I work with clients who are primarily entrepreneurs or small business owners, people who are here to serve humanity at a greater capacity. They're not here to be average. They're here to be extraordinary. And so many of them decided to become entrepreneurs or to become business owners because they had like this internal drive. And so that internal drive is like the motivating force behind them, right? But so many of them are so caught up in the doing that they lose sight of themselves. And so they get burnt out, they get exhausted, they start having health problems, or their relationships aren't great. And so they come to me and they're at this place in their life where something's falling apart and something's not right. And what I do is I help them discover the truth of who they are, like who they really are, help them get clarity on themselves, and so that they can be authentic and they can be vulnerable and they can show up from this place of freedom to express themselves, to truly authentically be themselves. And when you do that, you show up in the world as your most authentic self. You not only give other people permission to be their most authentic selves, but you no longer care. Like, you're not motivated by the fears that once motivated you. Motivated by like your highest purpose. You're motivated by something far greater, and that's freedom. And in that place, when you're in alignment, when you're operating from your heart space, from your own authentic space, then I believe that when you're in alignment, everything else opens up. So your relationships will improve. Your business will improve. You'll have more clients. You'll have all the things that you're looking for. And then you have more freedom to have more time freedom to travel, to explore, to have adventures, to do all the things that you love. So it's coming back to knowing yourself as kind of the beginning of having total freedom.
Very good. Very good. And talking about having the time for travel, I noticed that you don't stop. You're everywhere. Is that right?
Yeah. So I caught this travel bug, if you will. And I've always loved traveling. I've done a lot of traveling within the United States. I go out west every chance I can get, and I love to explore and see new places. And recently I spent 5 weeks in Southeast Asia exploring through Thailand and Indonesia. And it was the most life-changing experience I've ever experienced. I've been working on personal development and self-help and all of these things for so many years. I mean, really since I was 19. So for the last almost 20 years, I've been working on this. And that 5 weeks of being outside of my comfort zone, of being in a new environment, of being on the other side of the world, it really catapulted me to a whole new level of being and really of freedom that my life will never be the same ever again.
That's amazing. And you mentioned being outside of your comfort zone. That's something that's very important to me, because I know when I'm outside of my comfort zone, it means that I feel I'm going to achieve something. I'm either going to have a big failure or I'm going to have some big success.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the reasons of this podcast is to actually let people know that it's a good thing to be outside
Mm-hmm.
of your, outside of what you know, and have a bit of fear.
Yes. All change happens outside of your comfort zone. I mean, all change does. That's the only way you can change, really, is getting outside of your comfort zone. And so one of the things that I teach is getting really comfortable being uncomfortable, with being okay with being uncomfortable, and knowing that if you're here to make a big difference in the world and make a big impact and have a big transformation, then you're going to have to get really comfortable being uncomfortable. And then when that thing that was once really uncomfortable becomes comfortable, it's time for you to move up to the next thing. And it's a constant of facing your fears and like moving up to the next level. And I like apply that to like rock climbing, right? Because I like to rock climb. It's like when you get comfortable on one route, it's time to move on the next one that's going to challenge you. You got to keep challenging yourself.
Oh, that's something I've never done, rock climbing. And I did see one of your pictures, and you were hanging with one arm. Oh, that's pretty cool. So tell me about that, being outside the comfort zone. What was it about? Was it the culture over there? Was it the sceneries? Was it?
I think it's the fear of the unknown,
Okay.
Because, and you mentioned that you lived in Europe for 20 years, but we don't know what we don't know. So when we live in the United States and we're comfortable with our surroundings, you think about going to the other side of the world where you don't know the language, you don't know the money, you don't know the drive, how they drive on the opposite side of the road, like all of these things. It's just the fear of the unknown. We don't know what we don't know. And sometimes we fear that thing. We get so comfortable that so many people are like, why would anybody want to try something they don't know? Like I have a sister who's like, I have no desire to like leave the United States, right? For some people, they just don't have that desire. I think for those of us who are entrepreneurs, it's this drive that's within us. But it was the fear of the unknown. Like, I don't know what I'm getting myself into. I don't know if I'm going to arrive at the airport and I don't know how to get to where I'm supposed to go. I don't know if they're going to know my language. It's just the fear of the unknown. But when you face it, you're like, oh my gosh, what was I afraid of? Like, what? Why was I even afraid? It was the most amazing experience. But you don't know that until you face that fear. And I think if like people would just grasp that, if you have this fear, like face it. And then you're going to realize, whoa, this wasn't as bad as I thought it was. And if you fail, you learn something from it. And if you succeed, then the next time you go to face a fear, you've now got this new belief system that it's not as difficult. Like you're strengthening that muscle, that facing your fear muscle. And the more you strengthen that muscle, the easier it is to go after your fears. So, yeah.
Yeah. No, I can relate to that. When I moved from Europe and came back to Canada, I had been 20 something years away, and I moved to this city up north to work in the oil field, and I didn't know anybody. I had never been there. I didn't know anything. And it was the first time I ever saw temperatures below zero. And it was actually not minus 40 one day. And minus 40 Celsius is the same as minus 40 Fahrenheit. And a friend of mine called me from Europe, and he was telling me how cold it was because it was like almost negative temperatures over there. And here I was with minus 40. And because I didn't know what could happen to me, I was afraid if I took deep breaths with my mouth, I could freeze my lungs. I didn't know if my ears were going to break. And I was walking outside on the way to the hotel, and I was thinking, I don't know if I'm damaging my body by breathing. What should I do? And it was just things that other people consider it's normal, and everybody was walking around all normal. And I was so afraid because I've never experienced it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now it's a everyday thing, and I've been here for another 11 years.
Yeah. Just becomes normal, right?
Exactly. So Rachel, tell me, with all these experiences that you had in the States, outside of the States, and throughout your life, what is a failure that you had you had?
So about, let's see, I guess about 4.5 years ago, I was a completely different place than I'm at right now. I had what I would call my dream home, the big home that everybody dreams of having. I was married, 3 daughters, and I owned, I think at that time, 3 or 4 different businesses, very successful. Like if you looked at me from the outside, I had it all. I had the beautiful family, the beautiful home, everything that I wanted. And on the inside, I was a mess. I was like dying. I was searching outside of myself for fulfillment. Mm-hmm. And to kind of find a sense of purpose, a sense of fulfillment, like something within me wasn't content. So I was constantly searching outside of myself for different things. And one of the things that I had is I had a personal training studio. I had a pet resort. My now ex-husband and I owned a construction company. And in the personal training was kind of my passion. The pet resort, it was just a business that I started because I wanted to start a business. And I went to Google, like, what is a business that will withstand the economy crashing, and anything dealing with pets was like, so I was like, okay, I'm going to start this pet resort. And it was amazing and it was fun. And I loved the startup of it, but I didn't enjoy like the daily grind of the long days, the long hours of working with the animals. So I went and started this other business of personal training. And I did personal training. I did group fitness instruction. I did nutrition, all these different things I did in this arena. And what was happening with me is I was feeling fulfilled in helping other people. So it felt really fantastic for me to help other people. And so I also coached CrossFit part-time, and I spent a lot of time in the CrossFit gym myself. And because I was unhappy and my relationship was on the rocks with my now ex, I had a lot going on the inside, and I was going to the gym to get out my frustrations, if that makes sense. Yeah. I know a lot of people do that. It was like my stress reliever, which I now know, like the worst thing you could do if you're stressed is go put your body under more stress. And that's what I was doing all the time. So I was working really long. I was getting up at like 5 o'clock in the morning to teach a 5:30 a.m. boot camp class and have clients. And then I would go and do CrossFit. It was just this lifestyle that I was trying to keep up with. And I was in the CrossFit gym one day and doing handstand push-ups, and I literally fell to the ground. And I knew something wasn't right. Like I could feel my body getting weaker. I could feel my clothes getting a little bit tighter. And, for anybody who's in that fitness world, that kind of becomes your identity, right? And I was like, I'm losing this identity of like being this fitness person. And by the time I got to the doctor, they said, they wanted to hospitalize me because my adrenals had failed and my endocrine system was starting to shut down on me. And I was starting to have a lot of symptoms. And one of them was fatigue and the other one was weight gain. And a lot of things were happening, and I found I couldn't hardly get out of bed in the morning. And so at that point in my life, that was kind of the catalyst for my whole transformation to bring me to where I am today. I ended up closing my fitness business. I stopped coaching CrossFit. I ended up giving the pet resort to my sister, who now owns and operates the pet resort. I ended up going through a divorce and moving out of my dream home into a small little townhouse. Like everything fell apart. And for a while, I felt like I was a failure. Like here I was on the top and I lost it all. Like I failed. And then at some point I realized, and I know you're probably going to ask me this question, but I realized like that was the catalyst to get me to where I am today. So a lot of people who knew me, they felt bad for me. Like I was a failure. People, especially when I started gaining weight, I would see people in the grocery store and people would make comments. They're like, you're letting yourself go, or like, what's going on with you? Or like, it was a thing. And I was struggling with it. Like, yeah, I totally lost my identity. Not only did I lose my identity as being like this fitness person and I ran all the time and all this stuff, like now I'm losing my businesses and now I'm like moving out of my dream home into a townhouse. Like that was a time in my life. I don't look at it now as a failure, but
yeah, no, it's, I believe that it's only a failure when you give up on it, right? If you continue working on it, and we can tell now, of course, that failure, so-called, turn you into probably into what you are now.
Yes.
So is that the positive outcome of it, is you found yourself from that?
Yeah. So what I realized is that I had to, like, my identity, that I had this identity in having all of the things. I had this identity in the body image, and when all that came crashing down, per se, then I could begin to rebuild from an authentic, like, that was all fear-based. All of that was accomplished out of fear of not being good enough.
Mm-hmm.
And so when all of that fell away, then I could begin to rebuild on a foundation of love, of coming to know me, who am I? And so I've rebuilt, like, that was all built on fear. And when it came crumbling down, like, I rebuilt on love of myself and unconditional acceptance of myself, and, like, who I am is good enough. And I've completely and utterly rebuilt my entire life, and I'm happier than I've ever been in my entire life. And I'm traveling, I'm doing my business. I have never been, like, I'm so fulfilled in my business, but it's because I identified who I am, and I got in touch with myself and got clarity around what is it that I'm really here to do. Before, I was just looking for things to fulfill me. Now I'm not so much looking for things. I'm going within and saying, what is it that I'm here to do? What brings me the most joy? What do I love doing? What am I here to do? And I'm doing that. And it requires me to consistently face my fears. It requires me to, every time that mindset of wanting to feel like a victim, because I struggled. I mean, let's be real. I struggled when I left my husband. I had nothing, and he didn't want me to leave, and so he basically said to me, we had, the one business that we had together was very successful, multiple six-figure income. He said, if you walk out, you need to understand that you're walking out, and you're walking away with nothing. And at that point, I was like, I have two choices. I could walk away and start my life over with nothing, or I could fight him. And I could, hire an attorney, and I could go through the courts, and I could to get half. And I decided that the stress was not worth it. I'm going to start over from scratch, and I'm going to rebuild. And that's what I've done. I walked away and opened my first banking account on my own with like $40 in it or something. Like, I started over from scratch with nothing, and I've rebuilt my life that way. And so there's been times where I was like, my oldest daughter, she's now 16. She would say, Mom, please go get a job, because I can't stand to see you like this. Because it was hard. It was hard when you're like, how am I going to pay the bills? How am I going to keep my car? How am I going to, put food on the table this week? I mean, there were moments where I was on my knees on the ground, like, praying to God, begging, pleading, like, I know you have a plan for my life. What do you want from me? And I was in so much pain, just crying out, like, what do you want from me? What do you want from me? And so it wasn't always easy, but it was so worth it.
That's amazing. I went through something similar, and I had the same mentality as the why me? Why is it always me? And I see it differently now. And it's the gratitude. You hear everybody talking about the gratitude, and I couldn't see the things that I had to be grateful for. Mm-hmm. And it's the simple things, like I open my taps, I have water come out, right? How many people don't? And I can't remember his name, but there's this motivational speaker. He doesn't have arms or legs. Have you ever seen him? And I can't remember his name, but it's so fantastic how happy he can be.
Yes.
And how grateful he is for everything he has, while there are obviously things that he doesn't have. And I'm like, oh my goodness, how can that be? So yes, that's the mentality I try to force on myself now, is be grateful. Always it's never about why me. It's like, why not me, right?
It's It's happening for me, not to me. That's been a big thing for me. It's like everything that happens is happening for me so that I can grow, so that I can learn, so that I can become. And if it didn't happen, I wouldn't be who I am today. So that goes from like shifting from victim to empowerment when we can make that simple shift of when we want to say, why is this happening to me? It's not happening to you. It's happening for you. And gratitude was such a huge part of my transformation. I would, one of the things I taught early on when I was going through this, when I first started coaching, was the quickest way to move from fear to love energetically is through writing gratitude. And I would sit down with my gratitude journal and I would write until I would cry. And I would say, if you don't know what to write you're grateful for, hey, if I come into your house tomorrow and I took away all your forks, and I gave them back to you a month later, you think you'd be grateful for your forks? Like, are you grateful for your pillow? Like, come on now, you can be like, because people would say, I don't know what to be grateful for. Like, everything, write it all down. Just be grateful.
I was one of those.
Changes your perspective when you can be grateful for everything. You start realizing like, life isn't as bad as I think it is.
So Rachel, you're also an author. What kind of books did you write? Is it about yourself?
Yeah, so I've co-authored 2 books. I'm writing my own book right now. The 2 books that I've co-authored are both geared towards female entrepreneurs. One of them is about being unstoppable in life and in business. And I shared a story because shortly after I went through all of that, where I closed my businesses and went through a divorce and all that, I lost my big brother, who was like my best friend in the world. And when I lost him, I thought that just added to, right? Just added to everything. And how I kept going when I was at like the darkest moments in my life. How did I keep going? What motivated me to keep going instead of just giving up? And so I wrote about that in this book that I co-authored. And in writing, it was so healing for me. It was such a healing, powerful way for me to it's like writing gratitude. It allowed me to have a different perspective on how everything had happened in my life. And it was just, so for me, writing is about sharing with people what is possible, because I think so many of us, when we're in it, we think we're the only ones going through it. And if we can read a story of somebody else who's went through something similar or even more difficult than what we're presently going through at the moment in time, it gives us hope that we can keep going too. And so in writing, that was my reason for writing, was to inspire hope in somebody that no matter what they were going through, that they can come through on the other side and they can love their life. They can live a life that they love. It doesn't matter what you're going through. And I could go back and tell you stories from childhood, from abuse and different things that happened in my life that were very painful, that have made me who I am today. And it doesn't matter what my past is. I get to create my future. I get to create it. And so living very intentionally and doing the practice of whatever it takes to change your life, do it. And you can create whatever you want for your future. It doesn't matter what your past looks like. So that was what writing was for me. It was just expressing to people that hope that it goes back to what we said just a moment ago about life's not happening to you, it's happening for you, and looking for that.
Nice. I love how positive you are about things. That's so great.
Thank you.
So, Rachel, what is one of the books is there a book that has changed you and that has given you, that help that you just mentioned?
There's so many. I love to read. I read a lot, actually. And, when I was sick and my body was fatigued and when I went through the weight gain and all those things, the book that I read that was really helpful for me at that time in my life was Louise Hay, You Can Heal Your Life. That really shifted my mindset and was kind of a catalyst for the beginning stages of my healing of my emotions with my body and seeing how they're so interconnected. And then the next book that I could think of that was the most powerful for me was The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. That book really, really I went and bought several copies for everybody that I loved because it had such an impact on me. And then more recently, and I'm giving you more than one, I hope that's okay.
That's
more
okay.
recently, I've been reading Mark Batterson's books, and this book he wrote called In a Pit with a Lion on a Snowy Day was just so impactful. So different stages of my journey, different books have went along with me that have really helped me maybe move through to the next stage. So depending on which stage you're in, where you're at in your journey, but that last one I just read, and I'm reading, sometimes I read 3 or 4 at a time. I think I've got like 4 going on right now. But yeah, In a Pit with a Lion on a Snowy Day by Mark Batterson has been one of those that just kind of, it's like, oh, I'm here for a like divine purpose, and I'll never give up. I will never quit, and I will never stop facing my fears, and I will never lay down, and I will never be a victim, and I will never feel sorry for myself. Like, I'm here to change the world, and I'm going to keep going no matter what. That was that kind of book.
Nice. I took notes. I wrote it down. So I'll put it on the show notes, and I'll also make sure I'll have a listen to that. Like I said, I can't focus, so I won't be able to read it, but I'll listen to it for sure.
Awesome.
There we go. In a Pit with a Lion on a Snowy Day.
Yes.
Gotcha. That is great. Okay, Rachel, so since you love helping people, there's a ton of people out there that need help, and most of them don't even know that they need help.
Mm-hmm.
And probably, if you would have asked me a couple years ago, I would always say I don't need help from anybody, because I didn't know. And that's the thing, is I don't know what I don't know. And I didn't know everything. I didn't know. I thought I knew everything, and I knew nothing. And now that I changed, and I can see that I don't know anything, and I'm learning every day. And if I had the help a few years back, things could have been so much better and accelerated everything that I've learned since. So if there's people out there that need help and they want to get in touch with you, how can they find you? Where do they find you?
So I'm on Facebook. It's Rachel Gilmore. And Instagram, Rachel Marie Gilmore. LinkedIn, I'm all over the place. You can find me just about anywhere. Snapchat, let's see, where else? Yeah, I'm pretty much out there all over the place right now. And there's a couple of different Rachel Gilmores. I think on Facebook it's Rachel Gilmore, transformational speaker. Maybe I should have looked that up before this, but
I'll put the link on the show notes so they can know which one is the official.
Yeah, thanks. And I think that when it comes to coaching, it's about accountability. It's about support. It's about guiding people to their own inner truth. It's not about what works for you is not necessarily what's going to work for me. So I'm not here to tell you necessarily what to do. I'm here to guide you to your own inner truth. Mm-hmm. And that's the most powerful thing I think about working with a coach is because you don't know what you don't know. And I look at like the most famous, this actually one of the books that I'm reading right now is called Relentless. And he coached all these famous basketball players, including Michael Jordan. And Michael Jordan ended up working with this guy, I think, for like 6 years. And the reason he worked with him is because he realized that if he was going to be the best, he had to work with somebody because they didn't know what he didn't know. And I think that so many people don't realize they need help until they have this catalyst in their life that forces them to realize, I'm not where I want to be. Something's not right. I need help. And that's the perfect time for people to begin to realize that they need to work with a coach or somebody, a mentor. And it can catapult you so much further in your business than where you can get on your own. I know because I work with a coach. I've been working with coach for the last, 4 years now, consistently. I'll never not work with coach ever again in my life because I don't know what I don't know.
Exactly. Like I said, I wish that I had that mentality way back. Well, anyway, can't change the past, but like you said, we can change and decide our own future, and that's
Yes.
the greatness of it. So it's great to see that. Of course, your failures, they slowed you down, but they didn't stop you. And that's the important thing, is that we actually learn from our failures and grow from it. And Rachel, I appreciate you sharing your story and not being afraid to let it out.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to share with you.
Yeah, no problem. I appreciate your time, Rachel. I want to thank you for coming on the show. If there's one thing that the people listening right now, if there's one thing that they would remember and learn, what would you want them to do?
You know, it sounds so simple, but it's so true. Like, anything is possible. And if you have a dream or you have a vision, you have that dream or you have that vision. You've been given it because you also have every single thing within you right now at this moment that you need to accomplish it. So I believe that we've been given dreams because we are the ones who are to bring them to the light, to the world. So whatever your dream is that you have in your heart, you have everything you need within you to bring it to the world. And don't ever stop and don't ever give up until you bring it to the world, because somebody needs it. We need it.
Yeah. And you never know who's listening. And there's always somebody out there listening. And do you believe in the ripple effect?
Absolutely.
You're changing people's lives.
Yeah. So let's see, what's his name? David Hawkins wrote a book called Power versus Force. And this, I'll never forget this as long as I live. In this book, he goes through vibrational frequencies, and he says one person, one human being vibrating at the vibrational frequency of love, which they can track that, they can tell your vibrational frequency, will counterbalance 750,000 people vibrating at the frequency of fear. So we're all energy, and we're all vibrating, whether we think we are or not, we are, right? So one person in the vibrational frequency of love counterbalances 750,000 people in the vibration of fear. So you healing yourself, you working on yourself, you getting to know yourself, you learning to love yourself unconditionally, you becoming, embodying that energy of love. And it's not the romantic type of love. It's like this unconditional love of accepting yourself so completely for who you are that you counterbalance. We're always impacting. We're always making a difference if we're working on ourselves. And I think that that's the most powerful thing that we can do is to work on becoming the greatest versions of ourselves.
Nice. Can you repeat that book? That's very interesting.
It's Power versus Force is the name of the book. And I was looking to see if I have it sitting here on my bookshelves. I think it's David Hawkins is the author of that book.
Okay. I'll add it to the show notes. That's something very interesting. I got to look into that. Perfect. Rachel, again, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for spending time with us and sharing your story.
Thank you. Thank you so much.